Which set of dairy products can we as diabetics eat on a diet or meal plan? Are the full fat, the fat-free versions better or worse on blood sugar control and ultimately our A1Cs? Today, you will be exposed to a new set of studies that show how dairy specifically affects insulin-resistant type 2 diabetics. With this knowledge, you will understand why our doctors, nutritionists, and some very popular diet plans will fail you in the end. The dairy industry has aggressively marketed the Got Milk crusade for well over 20 years. The ultimate question: who has this campaign really benefited? Hint: 88% of the country is now considered metabolically unhealthy. But before we begin, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that gray notification bell. That way, you will be alerted when new life-changing episodes have been published. And most importantly, if you've learned something new or revolutionary today, and that is what this channel is all about, keeping you on the forefront of science, then please hit that like button for me. The first trait of becoming a resilient diabetic is to consistently search out for the truth. We are told, actually instructed by one set of experts, sure, you can eat that, you can drink that, it's good for your diabetes. We try the advice. Most importantly, we test it with our glucose monitors, only to realize objectively something is really wrong. To uncover the whole story, we must first look to our ancestral history for keys and also see what today's modern studies show. You will have a definitive answer as to whether dairy is good for us diabetics, and most importantly, what kinds of dairy are better options than others. In order for me personally to maintain that A1C of 5 and under, my views on dairy have had to change over the years, as you will find out why. We are all aware of the aggressive advertising campaign the milk industry has shoved down our throats for nearly 20 to 30 years? But I haven't seen them lately though. You know it as the Got Milk crusade, which depicts movie stars, athletes, just about anybody who's famous, with a wet, white film of what appears to be a milk mustache on their upper lips. They collectively endorse milk, presumably because it is healthy and nutritious for us. If we take a step back and apply the evolutionary template to milk drinking, it becomes hazy if that cow's or any other mammal's milk was ever intended to nourish another species throughout their, and here's the key point, throughout their entire adult lives. Rather, was it designed by natural selection to first and foremost encourage rapid growth, support the immune function, and prevent diseases in that specific young suckling animal? This leads us to asking those uncomfortable questions. Is that cow's formula a disaster for a human adult or us humans to consume when it's intended only for the young of another species? Most importantly, how does that compare to the needs of a human newborn? I bet you may not know this, but our human newborns, and most importantly, exclusively breastfed babies, are in ketosis. The fact that human babies are naturally in ketosis is an inconvenient truth because it implies that ketosis is not only a natural metabolic state for human infants, but it's beneficial too. Nature does not make mistakes. On the contrary, it gives an evolutionary advantage to us humans. Besides the extremely powerful and beneficial antibodies Mom has built over her lifetime, which then gets passed to the next generation, the specific design in breast milk, high in saturated fats, is one of the main factors behind the development of the large human brain. The next question we must ask: are we supposed to drink the milk from other animals past the breastfeeding stage? Why, you may ask? Well, we are the only mammals who do this, which often translates to intolerance or allergic reactions to the milk's proteins. One of the telltale signs to the answer: 65% of people on the planet cannot drink cow's milk without experiencing some kind of digestive stress. Many of Asian or African heritage are lactose intolerant. The notable exceptions are those who are from Northern Europe and their descendants. Until the dawn of agriculture, around 10,000 or so years ago, the subsequent domestication of dairy animals, milk, butter, cheese, and yogurt have never been a part of our ancestors' diet. Although 10,000 may seem unseemingly distant, it's actually very recent on our evolutionary time scale. Only 333 human generations have come and gone since we first domesticated animals, which include cows, sheep, and goats. Now, milk in its purest form is a mixture of carbohydrates, protein, and fats. The carbohydrate in milk occurs in the form of sugar called lactose, that's with an OSE, which in turn is made up of two simple sugars bonded together, a glucose molecule and a galactose molecule. When we consume dairy products rich in lactose, the bond of these two sugars must be broken apart by an enzyme in our guts called lactase with an ASE in order for the sugars to be absorbed. As I mentioned earlier, 65% of the world's people have not inherited the gene to make lactase and therefore are lactose intolerant. Not only that, but the majority of humans naturally stop producing significant amounts of lactase sometime between the ages of 2 and 5. Is this another clue or a way of the body telling us, please don't feed or force feed something I don't need or want anymore? The next question that must be answered: why are some types of dairy high in lactose and hard to digest, and others low and somewhat easier to consume? The answer to that all depends on how it was processed. In general, milk that's been fermented with bacteria is lower in the carbohydrate lactose than non-fermented dairy. In the dairy category, the lowest carb count go to butter and ghee. They are on top of the list. Butter has only 0.1 grams of carbs and 0.1 grams of protein per 100 grams. These two are essentially carb and protein free. On a side note, and I want you to listen very carefully to me here, steer you and your family away from all sweetened or fruit-flavored yogurts. This is not rocket science, but sweetened yogurts are very high in straight sugars, around 20 plus grams per container. What about the light, L-I-G-H-T, or light, L-I-T-E yogurts? Although they are aggressively marketed to the health-conscious consumer, many light yogurts contain even more added sugar to replace those fats. Some sweetened yogurts can pack close to 40 grams of carbs per serving. That's worse than drinking soda. Are the sugars in dairy the only thing we have to worry about? Or is there something more sinister behind the curtains everyone has been missing? This is where we turn to some studies to answer that next set of critical unknowns. According to a new study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, consuming dairy reduces insulin sensitivity in people with existing metabolic syndrome. In their randomized control trial, 72 participants were divided into 3 groups. They set out to determine dairy's impact on blood sugar regulation in those people who have risk factors including insulin resistance, obesity, and hypertension. The study's authors assumed both the low-fat group and the full-fat dairy group would have healthy blood sugars compared to the limited dairy group. What was interesting? By the end of the 12-week period, they found no differences in blood sugar levels amongst the three groups, but the full-fat and the low-fat dairy groups had worse insulin sensitivity compared to the limited dairy group. You have to remember, insulin sensitivity is what helps clear and store glucose more effectively, which keeps your blood sugar levels within healthy ranges. Decreased insulin sensitivity, also known as insulin resistance, means the body is less able to store glucose predominantly in your muscle tissue. This eventually leads to elevated blood sugars and then full-blown type 2 diabetes over time. Milk has always been promoted as healthy by our esteemed healthcare experts because it was discovered over a century ago that whole milk, yogurt, and most dairy have what's known as low glycemic indexes. In other words, they do not raise blood sugars much. They then hypothesized that these foods would be ideal to help prevent metabolic syndrome. On paper, yes, but boy, did they get this wrong, and they still do. About 5 to 10 years ago, more new studies unexpectedly revealed that these low glycemic dairy products, and here's the key to it all, regardless of the fat content, paradoxically causes large rises in blood insulin levels. This occurs even when milk is added to a mixed meal. Despite their low glycemic indexes, dairy foods maintain high insulin responses similar to white bread. That is devastating. In another small study, about 13 people with type 2 diabetes found that their insulin response after consuming dairy products was 5 times greater based on the food's carbohydrate content. This is the other reason why milk is so powerful as a nourishment for newborns. It is very insulin promoting, thus it has growth properties. I hypothesize the reason the body stops producing these critical enzymes like lactase past the age of 5 is to help protect the body from excessive insulin. The body does not want or can tolerate high insulin spiking foods beyond a certain developmental stage because it becomes inflammatory over time. Hyperinsulinemia, or high circulating insulin, is and has always been one of the true causes of metabolic syndrome. Heart disease and cardiovascular deaths are caused by inflammation. And what is one cause? Again, hyperinsulinemia due to the overconsumption of refined and excessive carbohydrates. Second, if you haven't thought of this, dairy is often considered filling for some lucky few. Others find cravings go through the roof. One piece of cheese leads to another and then another. For some reason, it may be almost impossible to stop eating. And for others, it becomes very easy to overconsume. If losing weight is one of your goals, then eating too much dairy will cause a weight loss stall. And to some degree, it may even cause a worsening of metabolic syndrome, whether from too many calories, too many carbs, and unfortunately, as you know now, high circulating insulin that comes along with it. After knowing all this, you're wondering, where does dairy fit into my life? If you are subscribed and are following me, then you know I became a late onset type 1 insulin-dependent diabetic due to an autoimmune attack. This occurred around 8 to 9 years ago. We know, without a shadow of a doubt, we diabetics have a much shorter lifespan than our peers. And for many diabetics, this disease inevitably becomes a very painful and debilitating journey. I personally do not want to die 15 to 20 years early. I do not want that impending neuropathy, gastroparesis, loss of eyesight, loss of limbs, or even be put on dialysis. All that eventually comes when blood sugars are kept in those non-diabetic ranges. I look at foods that can either help keep me healthy so I can live that long life free of any complications, or foods that simply create havoc. So just like you, I will test and test some more, including dairy, to see how my body reacts. Then I need to see 4 things when it comes to a food item. 1, does it help keep my blood sugars flat and easily controllable? Absolutely no swings up and down. That means my A1C must always be in those non-diabetic ranges of 5 and under. Period. End of story. This is non-negotiable. The sad truth, this is why today's experts, that is our doctors and nutritionists, call diabetes a progressive disease. Not for me and not for you either, once the truths have been revealed. Second, do dairy items require the least amounts of insulin to be used? Or in the type 2 diabetics case, insulin produced by that failing, burnt out pancreas. And that pancreas, once damaged, will continue to fail if pushed too hard to make even more and more excessive insulin. Consuming dairy puts a tremendous stress on that pancreas. Third, I needed to aid in body composition changes. That means it has to keep me energetic, muscular, and strong without adding any visceral insulin-resistant body fat stores. Fourth, and this may be very new to you, I judge how inflammatory my foods are by how often I get sick. You see, touch wood, I have not had a runny nose, the flu, influenza, or been sick from any of those recent and deadly viruses of any form of its mutations in the slightest of ways. No coughs or colds either. That's going back over 15 years. Not only do I have an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old here at home who always brings home those runny noses, those coughs, those flus from school, building up their own immune system, but I also own a retail business. I do work 7 days a week, completely exposed to the general public. I am even open during lockdowns. As a type 1, I am considered the highest of risk. But with the right diet in place, all that changes. Last note, supplementation. If a diet requires supplements, then I do not consider it an ideal diet. I do not take any supplements with the exception of an occasional vitamin D. That is if I have not got enough sunlight. So I look to exclusively lean proteins and nutrient-dense foods, ones that are high in nutrients, the vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, while simultaneously being low in calories and carbohydrates. In order to meet my strict criteria, dairy, unfortunately, is one of the foods I do have to limit. I have tested many of the fat-free versions, for example, cottage cheese, and it does raise my blood sugars, while the whole fat versions or the fatty foods like cheeses in general create insulin resistance. Adding cheeses to foods is a rare treat for me, and I have to keep it that way because just like in those studies, my insulin requirements go way up when fatty dairy is introduced. The one absolute gem in the dairy category, though, is butter, especially to cook with. I highly recommend it over any of the liquid cooking oils. Why? It is not only completely carb-free, but it is highly stable and does not oxidize, causing bodily inflammation. It is never the cholesterol foods I worry about ever, and neither should you. If those inflammatory insulin-raising foods are avoided, you will remain healthy. Always remember our number one rule as resilient diabetics. Let thy food be your medicine. Good food is medicine. Bad food will require you to take more and more medicine. If you'd like to learn more, I'll create a playlist for you on the foods that heal and the foods that make diabetes progressively worse, requiring you to take more and more medications. The first link you will see is to subscribe to this all-important life-changing channel. The second link is to the playlist on how foods affect a diabetic body. Have a great and productive day, and we will see you soon with another new episode, which are generally released bi-monthly. Bye for now.